500,000 people in the heart of the Soviet Union saw an apparition of the Virgin Mary. It happened in Ukraine, exactly 1 year after the nuclear disaster of 1986. And the most shocking thing is not only the immense number of witnesses, but who tried to stop them. For 70 years, the Soviet Union had one single goal: to erase the name of God from history. We are talking about a regime that destroyed thousands of churches, locked priests away in Siberian gulags, and convinced entire generations that faith was a psychiatric disorder. And yet, at the height of its power, this colossal empire armed with nuclear warheads literally short-circuited in front of a small wooden church in the countryside. What terrified the leaders of the Kremlin was a blinding light that appeared on the roof. What you are about to hear is one of the most astonishing government cover-ups of the 20th century. We have KGB documents, reports from atheist journalists, and footage of massive crowds defying machine guns in order to kneel in the mud. But there is one detail that made the Kremlin tremble. When the KGB sent its special agents, men trained in the strictest atheism, to arrest the crowd and expose the illusion, those very same agents raised their eyes to the sky, and they saw her. Their weapons lowered. Their secret reports, which were supposed to disprove the miracle, ended up confirming it. How could a Marian apparition defeat the most powerful propaganda machine in the world and foreshadow the end of the Cold War? It all begins on a date that was not accidental. On April 26, 1986, the world stopped as reactor number 4 at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant exploded, spreading a deadly radioactive cloud across Europe. Ukraine was on its knees. Invisible death was everywhere. Anguish and terror ruled the streets, while the Soviet government tried to hide the truth from the entire world. Exactly 1 year later, to the very second, on April 26, 1987, about 600 kilometers from the radioactive zone, there was a tiny farming village called Hrushiv. There stood an old wooden church dedicated to the Most Holy Trinity. It was a closed church. The communist authorities had sealed it years earlier, forbidding any religious service from taking place there. That morning, a 12-year-old girl named Marina Kizin was leaving her home. She was walking near the old desecrated church when she noticed something strange. Above the main dome, there was an unusual light. It was a silver glow, dense and powerful, a light that did not hurt the eyes but radiated an overwhelming presence. Marina moved closer, and inside that light, she saw the figure of a young woman, dressed in dark clothing, radiating an indescribable peace. She was holding a child in her arms. The girl ran back home to call her mother, Miroslava. Her mother, frightened, came outside and saw exactly the same thing. It was not a child's mirage. Within a few hours, the neighbors were called. Then, the villagers. By evening, hundreds of people had gathered around the closed church, staring at the roof. The light did not disappear. The figure was there, alive, radiant, motionless in her majesty. It was 1987. There were no smartphones, no internet, and above all, in the Soviet Union, phones were monitored and the press was completely controlled by the party. And yet, an inexplicable sociological miracle took place. The news broke through every wall of censorship. It spread like fire in the wind. Within 3 days, the roads to Hrushiv were blocked, not by hundreds, but by tens of thousands of people. They came on foot at night, crossing fields so they would not be seen by the patrols. They came from Ukraine, from Belarus, from the Baltic countries, and even from the most remote regions of Russia. In the following months, estimates would document that around 500,000 people traveled to this isolated village. Up to 70,000 people a day crowded into the mud around the church. The Kremlin had to react. Mikhail Gorbachev was in power. He was trying to modernize the country, and suddenly 500,000 Soviet citizens were defying the state in order to pray to the Virgin Mary. The order from Moscow was harsh and immediate. Crush this mass hysteria by any means necessary. The Soviet government sent military helicopters flying at extremely low altitude over the crowd, trying to terrify them and scatter them with the deafening roar of the rotors. But the people did not move. They sent the armed militia and the KGB. Agents blocked the roads, dug huge trenches around the village, put up barbed wire fences, and established checkpoints, threatening to arrest or fire anyone caught trying to reach Khrushchev. But there was one problem that weapons could not solve. The apparition was visible. The figure of Mary appeared not only on the dome, but also suspended above the church, and the light she radiated covered the entire area. Many witnesses said that the Virgin was crying. The authorities even tried to use powerful anti-aircraft searchlights at night to erase the heavenly image. But the artificial light only made the dazzling figure of the Madonna stand out even more. And this is where the story takes a turn that defies logic. Historical accounts and direct testimonies from former party members describe shocking scenes. KGB officers sent to arrest religious leaders in the crowd would stop, look toward the dome, lower their batons, and begin to cry. Many of them fell to their knees beside the peasants they were supposed to beat. The Soviet state newspaper, Pravda, desperately tried to contain the phenomenon. They began publishing pseudo-scientific articles claiming that the apparition was only an abnormal refraction of light, or even worse, that the radiation from Chernobyl was causing mass hallucinations across half the nation. But the lies collapsed in the face of physical evidence. There is no collective hallucination in the world that lasts for weeks, visible to 500,000 people of different ages, social backgrounds, and beliefs. Among the crowd, something even greater happened for the Catholic faith. In the Soviet Union, the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church had been declared illegal in 1946. It was a church of the catacombs. Its bishops had been murdered or exiled to Siberia. Its priests celebrated Mass in secret, in basements, risking death. But under the light of Khrushchev, fear disappeared. Underground priests, for the first time in decades, came out into the open. They began hearing confessions outdoors and celebrating the Eucharist before thousands of faithful under the powerless eyes of the Soviet police. The Madonna was not only giving a sign, she was literally resurrecting the persecuted church before the eyes of the entire world. But why did Mary choose that Ukrainian village? The answer is hidden in a chilling event that had happened long before. In May 1914, 73 years before these events and just before the outbreak of the First World War, the Virgin Mary had already appeared in that very same village of Khrushchev. On that occasion, she left a prophetic message that no one at the time understood. She said, "There will be war. Russia will become a godless country, and Ukraine will suffer terribly for 80 years. Churches will be destroyed, priests will be killed. But at the end of this time, Ukraine will be free." 3 years later, in 1917, the Russian Revolution broke out. The Bolsheviks took power, founded the Soviet Union, and launched the most ruthless anti-Christian persecution of the modern era. Mary's words had come true with mathematical and bloody precision. For more than 70 years, faith was repressed in blood. And so we return to 1987. Those 80 years of prophecy were about to come to an end. During the apparition of 1987, witnesses, visionaries, and believers received deep interior messages attributed to the Virgin. The tone was not one of condemnation, but of absolute hope. The message said, "I have come to thank the Ukrainian people because you have suffered more for the Church of Christ in recent decades. You are the nation that has shed the most blood for the faith. Your suffering is about to end." The Madonna also warned humanity, saying, "The world is in danger. Many people trust in science and forget God, but peace will come only if you repent and pray." It was a clear connection to the apparitions of Fatima, where the Virgin had asked for the conversion of Russia in order to prevent global tragedies. At Khrushchev, Mary was announcing that the atheist empire of evil, which seemed indestructible and ready to rule for centuries, had numbered days. Only 2 years after that apparition, in 1989, the Berlin Wall fell. And just 4 years later, in 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed in on itself. The regime that had promised to erase the name of Christ from the face of the earth was wiped from the political map. Brothers and sisters, we live in a time when it seems that faith is once again under attack. Do not allow anyone to tell you that your faith has no solid foundation. And to remind ourselves of the immense power prayer has to destroy the regimes of evil. I ask you to do one important thing. Write this short prayer of consecration and hope in the comments. Most Holy Mother, as you brought light into the darkness, bring peace to our time. I trust in you. Write it in the comments, and may God bless us all.